Assalamu alaikum. My name is Aisha Hussain Mohammed. I'm the current career guidance counselor at Utilitarian. My work history belongs to environment. I worked as an HR HR manager in various different organizations. That is Diragu Allied, Transmodial, and its hardware privately. Today I'm going to take the session of ethics and compliance. Now, when we talk about ethics, I want to ask you all, what does ethics means, and what does compliance means? Usually, when we talk about ethics, as you can see from the slide, you can see there are many words that describes or which leads to the ethic. That means reliability, honesty, morality, principle, responsibility. All these words relate to ethics, but none of these words individually are a person who practice ethics. So what is ethics and why is it important for us to practice in our work environment or on a daily basis? Simply, if we try to define what ethics means, it is a standard of behavior that tells us how humans behave or how they ought to act in certain situations when they find them. Now, how does ethics fall into community? As friends, parents, children, citizens, businesses, people, teachers, professionals, and so on, each and every member of our community needs to practice ethics. Each and every person have a responsibility or a moral value that needs to follow our efforts. I'll take a very simple example. That is, when we about our kids or when our kids are with, when they do things like prank on their friends, sometimes they lie to us or sometimes they lie to friends, and when we try to correct their behaviors, most important thing to say to them, that is the right, because we have a certain expectation from our kids to behave in a certain manner among. So simply, ethics means the standard of behaviors that tells us how to behave in a situation. Ethics has popularly been named as moral values, community standards, as just I mentioned. But in a professional setting, ethics is better understood as standards set by the professional bodies have their own ethics. Now, when we talk about office politics, we always say to each other, ethically, what that person have done is wrong. Morally, it is wrong. So, in order to identify these things, in order to set a barrier to identify what is right, what is morally accepted, what are the gray areas, we have set of code of ethics. Before we go in depth of ethics, how to make ethical decision making, I would like to I would like Now, this is a very common thing that happens in our community, where we talked about the right or where we say that person have done a certain thing or that person have done this. But the reality is, whatever it is wrong, it will always be wrong. You cannot say it is a right thing. So as the video shows, the person personally, for a fun, to have fun, she just steers her wheel, and the other person who is driving thinks that the car is going to drive towards him. So in order to save himself, he is again steering the wheel on another side. And this, I mean, as we can see from the video, other person, his car is turned around and almost he is crashed. So when we talk about ethics has been when we talked about being right or wrong for fun or just for humor basis, we cannot things that are wrong and say that, oh, I just did it for humor, or I just did it for fun. So this is one of the many reasons why all the professional bodies have their own ethics. The accounting bodies, their code of ethics is totally different from advertising code of ethics. And when we talk about code of ethics, the teacher's code of ethics is totally different from student code of ethics. So for each profession, most of the time, have a certain code of ethics. So what does code of ethics is trying to tell us? The code of ethics is trying to tell us that values, what are the things that are good and that are striving for, desire and seek to protect. So basically it is values that tells us what is good, principles that tells us what is right, and purpose is your reason for being. So principles talking about outlining how we may or may not achieve our values. Purpose is about giving life to our values and principles. Now from here again, I will show a video. This video might be, but it is talking ethics. So before we go into ethical decision making, I will go to this video.
How many decisions do you think you make each day? If you ask the internet, the answer will range from 70 to 35,000. If you ask us, it's the wrong question to be asking at all. That's because we're interested in ethics. We're not concerned about the quantity of your decisions. We care about their quality. You might want to think of ethics as a tool that helps us create the difference between a good decision and a bad one. Ethics is the branch of philosophy that asks the practical question, what should we do? This leads to the study of things like values, principles, beliefs, and norms. These are the things that shape our choices. Ethics asks us, how should we live? What choices should we make? And what makes our lives worth living? It tries to help us define the conditions of a good choice and then figure out which of our available options is the best one. Let's say a close friend, Lee, confides in you that they're struggling with depression. They're feeling isolated and alone. But whenever they're invited to go out, they find it impossible to do. Lee insists they don't want anyone else to know. They're trusting this information to you alone. A few days later, another friend comes to you, frustrated about Lee. Lee's flaked on plans at the last minute yet again, and your friend has had enough. They've decided they just won't bother inviting Lee out anymore. So you're torn. If Lee stops being invited to things, the isolation could make them feel even worse. Sharing information about their depression might help Lee be treated with more empathy and compassion. But it would be a breach of trust. And if Lee found out, especially in a vulnerable state, who knows what might happen? What do you do? Keep the secret and allow Lee to be socially isolated? Or break Lee's trust, but do it for their benefit? Answering this question means getting clear on what matters, our values and principles. Our values are the things we hold to be good and therefore care about most deeply. Things like justice, knowledge, family and equality. In this case, we're likely to value both trustworthiness and compassion, which pull us in different directions. So it looks like an appeal to values alone won't let us solve this dilemma. We don't just need to know what's good, we need to know what's right. This is where principles come in. They help us draw a line in the sand. They determine the acceptable ways of getting the things that we value. So what's our guiding principle with regard to Lee? Some people might adopt a principle like be true to your word, meaning you keep Lee's confidence no matter the risks. Others might be inclined towards a principle like act in people's best interests and decide that it's in Lee's best interest that people know about the depression. Of course, there are still ambiguities, which is part of what makes ethical decision-making so complicated. So how do we select which values and principles to adopt? And how do we make choices when we face a conflict of values and principles? Good versus good, right versus right. What helps to orient our judgment is a connection to purpose. What's our guiding North Star? What's our reason for being? Think about Lee again. Now, think about the purpose of friendship. What are friends for? Think about why Lee decided to tell you in confidence. Your purpose as Lee's friend is to share their life with them, the highs and the lows. But it's their life and it's their decision on who they share it with. Lee chose to share this information with you alone. Given this, even if you prefer to act in people's best interests, thinking about purpose and thinking about Lee's purpose might encourage you to take a different path. Every time we make a choice, we change the world. What kind of world do you want to live in? Whether you make 35,000 choices a day or just one, what's important is that you make choices that are good and right. Choices you can justify, ones you can be proud of. That's what makes the choices actively yours.
So, as I mentioned earlier, what ethics is about, or when we make a decision on ethics, these are the three areas we have to focus: values, principles, and purpose. So, now how do we make the ethical decision, or how are we going to do this? Identifying what is not ethics and what is ethics. We usually tend to mix up our feelings, our religion, or when we talk about the social justice, we talk about ethics very easily. We combine all these areas or all these elements into ethics and say that there is no ethical value when we have made a decision. But before that, we need to understand, or we need to identify what can be included as ethics and what cannot be as not ethics. Feelings. Feelings provide a lot of information about our ethical choices, but this is identified as not ethics. Religion, ethics applies to everyone, but everyone doesn't follow the same religion. Law might deviate from what is ethical. Culturally accepted norms, cultures are different. Science, it alone doesn't tell us what to do. So these 5 areas we consider as identifying what is not ethics. Why do we say that feeling is not an ethics? Because if we make decision based on each and every feeling, probably we will be making a wrong decision. As you can refer back to the video, or when you watch the video again, you will see how that person had made a decision not based on his feelings. In the sense, he considered that as a value because the person have only disclosed in confidence to one person his condition, and he has not disclosed his condition to another person. Yes, you have a feeling that this is the right thing to do, but still it is not about you the decision is about. So we cannot make decisions, or we cannot make an ethical decision based on a feeling. Religion, we have hundreds of religion around the world, and if we are going to make decision based on each and every single religion, most of the time we will be saying that it is not ethical. So that is the reason why we say it is not identified as, and religion is not identified as ethics. Because the other major reason is like all the people around the world are not following the same religion. Different religions have different values, different religions have different principles, different religions have different purposes. So when we talk about the proper decision making process, we will be failing these main three areas. And law might deviate from what is ethical. Now, law is not all the cases, or when we talk about the social justice, sometimes it's not about the right ethical decisions. One of the many reasons is the law we have in Maldives is not going to be applied in another country. Each and every country have their own set of laws and their own set of rules and regulation. So their decisions will be made based on those rules and regulation. Culturally accepted norms, cultures are different. Like again, like religion, law, and feelings, we do not have the same culture among all of us. Again, it becomes different cultures have different norms, different cultures have different values, and these all contradict with the main values, principles, purposes that we are saying that needs to be followed through when we make an ethical decision. Science, it alone doesn't tell us what to do. Sometimes science only gives us questions, sometimes it gives us the right answer to certain situation, but mostly science is based on facts. So when we talk about certain facts, it might not be ethical to the situation. So these are the reason, or these is identified as what is not ethics. So the moral life is more than carrots and sticks. When we talk about morality, or when we talk about the right thing to do, we always think about how can I make a decision in the right way? Would I be happy for this decision to be headlining the news tomorrow? Is there an ethical non-negotiable at play? Will my action make the world a better place? What would happen if everybody did this? What will this do to my character or the character of my organization? Is this consistent with my values and principles? These are the situations we always face through on a daily basis. When we scroll through our Facebook, or when we scroll through our Instagram, we see pictures, we see posts, sometimes we see people tag us in certain kind of posts, and we wonder ourselves whether this can be in the headline tomorrow, or is this something right, or what would happen if everybody, or if you do certain things. There is a saying that says wrong is going to be wrong even if so many people does it, right will be right even if one person does it. So it is, if in simple terms, no matter how many people do the wrong, it cannot be reversed as a right thing. It will always be wrong, but even if one person does the right thing, it will be considered as the right thing. So what we have to consider is, when we talk about ethics and decision making, we have to be ensuring ourselves, if you make this decision, and if you make this decision, will you be happy Will you be happy to see this headline news tomorrow? Will there be an ethical non-negotiable at play? Will your action make the world a better place? For example, there is office political issue, or there is an office staff issue where you have dealt in a very fragile manner, thinking of all the employees that are related to the case. You made the issue, you made the case, or you made the decision based on all the policies and procedures, and you thought that you have done the right thing. But it might not be the right thing by the other person, but ethically, whether if it is right, then your conscience will be at peace. So, will my action make the world will the world be a better place? That is the big question we have to answer every time we make an ethical decision. What would happen if everybody did this? Now, this question comes when we talk about the immoral things we do, or sometimes things where when they are in the gray area, we wonder if this, what will happen if everybody does this? What will this do to my character or the character of my organization? Every time when you make an ethical decision, or every time when you make a normal decision, everything doesn't have to be ethical in the sense, please do not take me wrong when I say everything doesn't have to be ethical. What I'm trying to say is whenever you make a decision, it is always going to show off part of your character. If you are representing an organization, whatever decision you make, it will be named after your organization too. So that is the reason why I'm saying, what will this do to my character or the character of my organization? And is the decision consistent with my own values and principles? Each and every person have their own set of values, their own set of principles. Now the question is, are the values right or are the principles right? That is something that you have to decide by yourself when you are working, or when you are talking, or when you are making a decision. If you have the wrong values and wrong principles, and when you make a decision, usually might be a wrong decision which may be ethically incorrect. So all the decision, whatever you take, always should be based on your values and principles. It needs to be consistent. And this is called the ethical dilemma. Ethical dilemma is an ethical issue where the decision maker must choose between two outcomes that are conflict with each other. Now, the reason why we always put people in, where we ask people what an ethical dilemma is, because there are situations where we go into a hot spot and we wonder ourselves, okay, what is the right decision? And even if you make the right decision based on your own values and principles, you may still be at a loss, because both the decisions are right, but you have to weigh yourself in what is the most right thing. And that is where the ethical dilemma comes forward into. When we fall into these situations, we call them where you have to choose between two outcomes that conflict with each other. Yes, the outcome will be same, but you have to choose a better one which you think will give the most, or we can say in other words, give us the highest probability of not going wrong, or it doesn't go against your values and principles. Now, how do we acquire ethical values? Now, moral development is the process when people develop individual practice of ethical discernment, judgment, and decision making. When we make decisions, we also engage people, that is family, peers, and sometimes we take into consideration our religious belief and other experiences. This is how we acquire our ethical values. As we grow, like from the example I gave in the beginning, we are teaching our children not to lie. Consistently, we keep on telling them, please don't lie, please don't tell. Please do not be afraid to tell us the truth. So if we keep on practicing this every day, for that child, when he or she grows up, his conscience will be always reminding him not to lie. So who is engaging in this set of ethical values? The family. And the same thing goes in our community also. Our teachers, our friends, our colleagues, we always tend to remind each other. We tell them the things they think are right, simply like lying, dishonesty things. We remind them not to do it. So because of these things, an automatic value is inbuilt in us to ensure that we make the right decision. And basically it falls into ethical decision making. Now, religious beliefs. Like earlier I said, when we talk about ethics, sometimes it cannot be defined as a factor to make the right decision, but it is the belief that is inbuilt in us that gives us values. So because of these values only, we are making the ethical decisions in the right way. Religious beliefs, each and every religion have a different set of values, so we follow those values. In Islam we have certain values. The most important thing we always say is we think if a person who prays regularly will have the right values. And the same goes in Christianity. People who go to church regularly, they consider them as very religious people who do not who are moral, who have the moral right values. And experiences, sometimes we acquire our values from our experiences. When we visit other countries or when we visit other islands, when we talk with people, we learn from their experiences. When they share their difficulties or when they share their tragedies, we learn from these things, and we set in our minds, we set certain things that if this happens to us, we will not follow that way. For example, if someone takes money or someone is making there's a fraud case against a person, like taking the money, promising a service, but they do not, at the end they do not deliver the service or they do not deliver the product. This is all part of people experiences. So when we make a decision, for example, if someone come and tells me, okay, I have this product that I want to sell it, I want you to buy for say $1,000, but you have to pay me in advance so that I can give it to you. And when people have shared these kind of experiences, the fraud cases, we make a decision ourselves whether to give the money. Not because, just because he is a close friend doesn't mean that we have to trust or we have to give it out and give the money as soon as he tells us. So our ethical values are brought up, or it is individually practiced because of things that are influenced to us. What are the 5 approaches of ethical standards? In order for us to reach to a certain ethical standard, we need to consider 5 approaches. Now these 5 approaches are being practiced at an international level by organizations, by people, or by certain countries even, or by the code of ethics when they are building or when they are developing a code of ethics, they do follow these approaches. Now there are 5 approaches of ethical standards. The first one is the Utilitarian Approach. Now this approach is about, this was developed in 19th century by Jeremy Bentham and John Stuart Mill to help legislators determine which laws were morally best. Both Bentham and Mill suggested that ethical actions are those that provide the greatest balance of good and evil. To analyze the issue using the utilitarian approach, they first identified the various causes of action available to us. So the ethical action is the one that produces the greatest good and does the least harm for all stakeholders. That includes the clients, colleagues, and the community. Now, it focuses on the consequences that actions or policies have on the well-being of all the people. And what we have to consider is we have to keep in mind that different people have different opinions, and different people often identify benefits and harms in a different way. And this also means of any two actions, the most ethical one will produce the greatest balance of benefits over harms. So, and third, we choose the action that will produce the greatest benefits and the least harm. The ethical action is the one that provides the greatest good for the greatest number. So simply, the utilitarian approach is about trying to increase the good done and to reduce the harm done in a situation. Now, what do you see in this image? This is a very famous comic book, Calvin and Hobbes. The first, as you can see, it says, "Come, we play. Can we play war and not peace?" How do you? Too few role models. And the other is saying, "I'll be the fearless American defender of liberty and democracy, and you can be the loathsome, godless communist oppressor." We are at war, so if you get hit with a dart, you are dead, and the other side will win. And they start playing with each other. At the end, they both go. Nobody is winning, nobody is losing. So, what does the game says? It's kind of it is saying it's kind of a stupid game, isn't it? Because nobody is winning and nobody, at the end, both are actually losing. So when we talk about the utilitarian approach, of any two action, the most ethical one will produce the greatest balance of benefits over harms. So when they played that game, it's a simple scenario where it's highlighting that both of them are losing. So in a utilitarian approach, we are talking about the best outcome for most of the people. Now the second approach, rights approach. Now this is about the ethical action, one that best protects and respects the moral rights of those affected. It is also about the humans who have the ability to choose what they do with their lives. They also have the right to be treated as ends and not merely puppets where the end justify the means. And the fourth point as a rights approach is it's about choices, what kind of life to lead, to be told the truth, not to be injured to a degree of privacy. So when we talk about the rights approach, in a very simple manner, it's about how we choose what they do, how the decision is going to impact the person's rest of life. Now when we take about for example, when we take about the rights approach, it is basically trying to identify certain interests or activities that our behavior must respect. So the basic idea here is that people have a right to be treated with respect and dignity. While it might be a bit strong to say that a certain person has a right to visit me, or a person have a general duty to visit an elderly person. I think this is one of the common examples in our community where when we talk about visiting people when they are sick. Sometimes distant people, when they hear about a certain person certain person is sick, they have this urge to visit. But we think ourselves whether you have any kind of right to visit that person because you have not been in touch for a long time. What kind of right do I have to visit? So this kind of situation, when we talk about I must not choose to do so in order to ensure that I obtain an affection from that person. You are doing that because you feel it's the right thing to do. You cannot just think, oh, if I go and visit this person, he or she will be able to do something for me later. If we have this mindset, then our ethical, the way we are making decision ethically is not right. So that is the reason why we say rights approach. The important approach to this ethic is it has the roots in the philosophies of 18th century, where this was led by Immanuel Kant and others like him who focus on the individual's right to choose for herself or himself. Now, according to these philosophers, what makes human beings different from mere things is that people have dignity based on their ability to choose freely what they will do. When we talk about the rights approach, we are also talking about whether our actions are wrong to the extent where we are violating the other person's individuality. So there are 5 things that we have to consider apart from the things you see in the slide. That is, each person has a fundamental right to be respected and treated as a free and equal person. It also implies the other rights that must be protected if a person have the freedom to direct. The principle states of an action or policy is morally right only if those persons affected by the decision are not used merely as instrument. When we make decision, what we sometimes, I think we all see in our community how sometimes people use other people for their benefit. And this is where we talk about you are ethically wrong, you are morally wrong. And when we take these kind of scenarios, what happens is they are applying the rights approach. So the most important thing is we have to identify the interests or activities that our behavior should respect, especially those areas of our lives that are of such value to us that they merit protection from others. Another Calvin and Hobbes image. This image is also representing about the rights approach. So you can go through this image and you can try to jot down yourself what kind of rights approach is used or how this image shows the rights approach based on the explanation. The third approach is the fairness or justice approach. This is about ethical actions that should treat all human beings equally, or if unequally, or then fairly based on the standard that is defensible. Meaning people are paid more based on their greater contribution to the organization, and we say that is fair. I think the example is very transparent. It doesn't have anything that makes us uncomfortable. Or in simple terms, when we talk about the fairness and justice approach, the example very clearly explains what this approach means. However, I would go to a little bit history of it. The fairness or the justice approach ethics has its root into the teachings of the ancient Greek philosopher Aristotle. What he said is equals should be treated equally and unequals unequal. The basic moral question in this approach is how fair is an action? Does it treat everyone in the same way, or does it show favorism and discrimination? Favorism, there are two things in this approach when we have to consider. That is favorism. Now, in our own words, we say favorism means where we are making a decision that is going to be more beneficial for us, or we get inclined towards a person because we like the person or we have a personal relationship. In other words, it's like favorism gives benefit to some people without a justifiable reason, because like I said, the person is related to me, or the person is going to have add a financial value to me. So and the other thing is discrimination. Discrimination imposes the burden on who are no different from those on whom burdens are not imposed. So both favorism and discrimination are unjust and wrong. So in the example here, we are saying people are paid more based on their greater contribution. But still, sometimes we argue that it is not the right way. I think one of the simple examples I can take is Ramadan allowance. Earlier, where we had in the Ramadan allowance, it was said 1/3 of the basic salary. So what happens is, person who have a higher salary is getting a high Ramadan allowance, and the person who have lower income is getting the minimum 2,000, or maybe it was lower than that. So if we take this Ramadan allowance as a fairness or justice approach, I'm 100% sure most of them will be saying that the allowance method that was practiced earlier was not ethical, because at the end of the day, everybody is working in Ramadan period. uh, Starting from the director to the functional level employee, they are all working during Ramadan, irrespective of fasting. So why is it justifiable, or how can we say that the director should get more Ramadan allowance and the functional level employee should get less Ramadan allowance? Now, please do not take this example into a certain context and apply it, but this is something that we saw, and a lot of employees did raise their voice. And this is not like in the corporate sector, we had a lot of issues. In my experience, a lot of foreigners even had certain issues. A lot of locals were complaining that the foreigners were not fasting, but still they are getting an allowance. We are fasting and we are working. They are not fasting, they are having a normal day. So when we talk about allowances also, we have to consider all these things. So we need to make sure that there is a fairness when we distribute a certain allowance or certain benefits to employees. The common good approach. This is the fifth approach that is used when we talk used in ethical decision making. This approach basically assumes, or it suggests, that the interactions with our community are the basis of our ethical reasoning. While respecting values, freedom of individuals to pursue their own goals, the common good approach actually challenges also to recognize and further those goals we share in common with people. We talk about respect and compassion for all the people, especially the vulnerable, and requirements of such reasonings in this approach. This approach, it also draws attention to marginalized group people, meaning those people who are like sent people, who are special, who have the special disability, people who need special need, who are in the special need category. So what we say is the common good approach presents a vision to the society as a community whose members are joined in shared pursuit of values and goals and that hold in common. And it is also comprised of individuals whose own good is inextricably bound to the good of the whole. The principles state what is ethical and what advances the common good, meaning which of the available options treats people with more dignity and respect. Does any one of the available options do more good than harm? Which of the available options develop virtues most effectively? Is any one of the available options more fair and just? Or does any one of the available options make our community better as a result? So basically, the common good approach is talking about how we can make a decision that is helpful to everyone in our community, that is going to benefit everyone, that consider the weak person, that consider the rich person, but basically respecting each other, being compassionate when we make the decision, and we have a certain reasoning, a valid reasoning, meaning there are requirements for such reasoning. The virtue approach. Now, the approach is about dispositions and habits that enable us to act according to the highest potential of our character. Honesty, courage, compassion, generosity, tolerance, love, fidelity, integrity, fairness, self control, prudence are all examples of virtues. Virtue ethics ask us, what kind of person will I become if I do this? Or is this action consistent with my acting at my best? I think this is something we fail to practice every day. When we make decisions, for example, when you are in the organization, I hear a lot of people say, it is not my stand, but according to the company rules and regulation, I have to follow this. So if a person have the tolerance, or if the person have fairness, integrity, sometimes you don't go and say these things, because when you say these things outside, you are contradicting with your organizational values and your values. If you really think it is not the right thing, you need to tell in front of the people who are there to hear your decisions how you think it's not the right way. So that's why we say in the virtue approach, you need to have a lot of courage, you need to have a lot of honesty, and you need to have a lot of compassion. Because when you fail to have that compassion, you fail to be honest, you fail to have the courage, and you lose your self control, make the decisions based on other people. The virtue approach basically focuses on attitudes, dispositions, or characters traits that enable us to be and to act in ways that develop our human potential. What we need to keep in mind is different communities, different organizations, different communities, they have different virtues. So the principal state is what is ethical is what develops moral virtues in ourselves and our communities. Basically, if we adopt these approaches in our daily lives, it enables us to pursue the ideals we have built in ourselves. Also, this approach is also assuming that there are certain ideals towards which we should strive at the end of the day. It is about providing the full development of our humanity, where we discover through our thoughtful reflection on what kind of people we have the potential to be. Are we going to be honest people? Are we going to be compassionate people? Are we going to be people who have an integrity, fidelity, or do we have a self-control among ourselves whenever we make a decision? If someone gives us money, or if someone is going to bribe us to make a decision, are we strong enough to say no to it? We have that kind of self-control within us. We have that kind of integrity within us to deny the person and report the person to the respective authorities, or tell at least in a polite manner to say no to the other person. And this is we call the virtue approach. So simply it means, is the action consistent with whether it is going to be consistent with your best behavior. We may not agree on the content of some of these specific approaches because each and every approach have a certain kind of behavior. So the other thing is, we may not agree to the same set of human and civil rights. We may not agree on what constitutes the common good. We may not agree on what is a good and what is a harmful action even. Therefore, what is important is to focus on how to make the right decision given a specific situation, or having a method for ethical decision making is important so that we are taking the right decision based on the situation. There is no one particular approach that can be used in all the situation. For each and every situation, you have to analyze all these approaches and choose the best approach that will give the right decision. So in the simple meaning, in a simple way, the 5 approaches of ethical standard, it says the utilitarian approach asks us which option will produce the most good and do the least harm. The rights approach, which option best respects the rights of all stakeholders. Fairness or justice approach, which option treats people equally or proportionately. The common good approach, which option best serves the community as a whole, not just some members. The virtue approach, which option lead me to act as the sort of person I want to be. Now, there is a set of framework that is followed at an international level or in various organizations when they are making decision. This is a scenario which we will be discussing at the end of this session, that is, what is ethics. The scenario says Margie is at the age of 3, has been going to nursery school for 4 months. The nursery school employs a multi-professional team including OT, SLP and PT, that is a professional team where we are talking about having a physical therapist, behavioral therapist, this kind of people. The teacher has observed that Margie is either unresponsive or slow to read. As a result of a few months of observation, the teacher suspects that Margie have a hearing loss and suggests the family that they seek professional input. But the mother responded that she couldn't relay this information to the father because of his own chronic health problem. What would you do if you were the teacher? I think this is a dilemma a lot of teachers fall into, because we have situations where when we talk about a student situation, the parent's mind is set in a certain way, and when the teacher suggests certain things, it doesn't go well or it doesn't gel well with the parents. Now, in this situation, the student's father is having chronic health issues, so the mother is in a situation where she don't know how to relay that information to the parent or to the father. So the question is, what would you do, the teacher? Now, this is the 5 stages that is used by people when they are talking about making an ethical decision. The first thing is, you recognize whether there is an like whether there is a fact, whether the facts are right or not, and you also have to consider the ethical issue. Now, is there a choice between good and bad? Are there effectiveness or efficiency or legal implications? Could be decisions damaging for any of the stakeholders? The very first thing that you need to consider is, you need to get the facts right before you pass the information to someone else. What is subjective, objective, what kind of information you can relay onto the other person. You know enough to make a decision, Who are the relevant stakeholders in this particular case? Were all the stakeholders consulted? What are the options, or what are the actions you can take? So the first thing is recognize an ethical issue, whether there is or not, and then you get all your facts, and then you evaluate your alternative actions. After that, you make a decision and act and reflect on the outcome. Now, in this situation, you have to consider what are the options, which option will produce the most good and do the least harm, which option best respects the right of all the stakeholders. In this Margis scenario, the stakeholders are teachers, school management. Teachers, I'm going to take the school management as a separate stakeholder, teacher as a separate stakeholder, because it's a teacher who is going to deal with the student at all times, and he or she is the person who have to implement school management. So she is going to be considered as a separate stakeholder. The parent going to be another stakeholder, and the school have their own psychological counselors, their behavioral counselors. These people will be considered as different stakeholders, because the teacher have to go and consult with these people, or share the issue of the student, and then get their feedback, evaluate the alternative actions with them, and then only he or she can make a decision. Which option do you think addresses the situation best? Which option agrees best with previous decision made? Whenever you make a decision, you have to see, or you have to know if there is a precedent decision. You need to look into the history, or you need to refer back to other similar cases and see if there is any kind of similarity, or is it going to be a different kind of decision you have to make in this case. It's always good to have a precedent. If you do not have, then you are going to set a precedent. So it is important to evaluate all the options and then make a decision. So if I told someone I respect, or told a television audience which option I have chosen, what would they say? Now, in this social media frantic environment, we also have to consider our decisions, how it is going to affect in the social media. Um, in the past few days, or if we say in the past 2 weeks, we have seen a lot of scenarios where we talked about not performing well, or either we have seen some people blaming each other. So these kind of things is goes or blows out of proportion, because when we go and share with some people, we do not consider how his actions will reflect on the other person. So it's always important, when you make a decision and when you take an action, you need to consider the best options you have, the previous decisions you have, how it is going to affect the community. How can my decision be implemented with great care and attention to the concerns of all stakeholders? How did my decision turn out? What have I learned from this specific situation? Once you make a decision, you also need to reflect on the outcome and see, or go through it again to know if you have made the right decision. If so, how can I make it a better decision next time if a scenario like this happens? How can it be? So there are 5 areas or 5 stages that you need to consider when you make a decision. Recognize first if there is an ethical issue, then you get the facts, evaluate all your options, make a decision and make a decision, and then reflect on the outcome. This is a format that you can use on a daily basis if you are a person have to make a lot of decision, and you think that you have difficulty in identifying whether it's ethically right or ethically wrong. What you can do is you can prepare a chart like this. You can write down the subjective information, the objective information, and you highlight on basis of ethical consideration, whether it's good, rights, reality, the community, on personal basis. and you can also consider whether it is effective or efficient. Stakeholders, who are the stakeholders you have, whether you have consulted on them or whether you have not consulted. Implementation steps, how you are going to implement the decisions. Reflection and outcome. This basically, this chart keeps a record of the whole scenario, what your thoughts are on the situation, your objective, the subjective information, all this information. And whenever you reflect back, you can go through this format and see how you have made the decision, the process you have made the decision, and the things you can improve. So earlier also I have talked about, you might be considering thinking about, when we talk about facts, what is objective information? Objective information is about the professional team. In this case, it says Margie's age is 3 and the free medical care is already being given from the community. She is in preschool, teacher is concerned, teacher has spoken to mother. This is the objective information that is related to this case. Now, what are the subjective information? The subjective information in Margie's case is the student is having a hearing loss. She is being reported on behavioral issues. Mother says she cannot talk to the father. Mother says father has health issues. Now, who are the stakeholders? Like I said earlier, the teacher is a separate stakeholder. Margie, mother, father, and the multi-professional team. The multi-professional team can be considered as the management team of the school, as well as all the other behavioral counselors, physical counselors. All these people can be considered as the team. Now, whether she has consulted or not, teacher consulted, but she has not consulted to Margie or mother or father or the multi-professional team at the school. Options. How I reconfront the mother and get her consent. Get the team and the parent together and negotiate. Now you're going to, when we go, I'll go back to the table so that you can understand a little. Here it says all the options that is available on the situation. You have to write down all the situation, all the options that are available based on the situation, and then you consider the ethical consideration like this. Confront the mother and get her consent. Good, right, equality, community, personal. Get the team and the parent together and negotiate. Right, equality, community, personal. Again, it's a question mark. Organize with the local clinical hospital to screen the whole school for hearing problems, the whole community. Does the school need to present all the students to know whether there is a hearing problem, just in order to make make sure that the teacher is right? If there is a financial problem at home, you are convinced parent to take her to the local clinics for a hearing test, seeing that she still has free medical available. It's again another question. Options is list reconnecting the mother and get her consent. Get to learn and be a parent together, and you find it as a good, right, and equal decision. Organize the local hospital to screen the whole school for hearing problem. So no, if there is a financial problem at home, you can convince the parent to take her to the. So now, based on this case example, I want all of you to write your own thoughts. Now the options that are given in this situation, you can be creative on your own. You don't need to take all these options. You can make your own options. What you have to consider is the facts or the case that are given in the case. Based on the case, what you need to do is need to follow this method and write down your answers. And that is your case study practice. As part of this coursework, you will also be getting additional case studies. You can complete the case studies and submit it to your course coordinator. Now, there are 5 areas that we also need to consider when we are talking about a responsible ethical decision. The 5 areas are ensuring integrity, controlling, contributing to the knowledge base, applying professional knowledge, balancing the stakeholders' interest, and respecting the differences. What do we mean about ensuring integrity? Now, it is the simple information that we talk about when we go through daily news every day. We say, "Okay, this is a lie. This person doesn't know the truth. Why is he saying these things?" So these are things where we talk about integrity. Why do a person simply lie to another person, whether he is getting any benefit from it or not? So basically, ensuring integrity means you tell the truth in your conversations, tell the truth in your reports, tell the truth in all the communications. You ensure to follow the copyright and other laws. Now, this is going to imply on when you are writing about, like for example, when you are trying to write a story, you are saying this is your own story, but what happens is when someone reads it, he or she he is going to tell, "Oh, I have read this story from somewhere else. This is not the original. This is not the original author. He or she has copied it." So again, you are lying, and this is also about cheating the law, or meaning, I mean, the word cheating might be considered as inappropriate, but basically the person have taken someone else's work and and is saying that this is my work. So this is also part of it is also about not divulging in company data to unauthorized parties. We see this every day on a daily basis where people share company information, where people share personal information about others. We think that it's okay. Sometimes when we talk to friends, we hear their personal stories and then we go and tell the other person, "You know what happened? I have this friend who had this issue. This is what happened to her." But when you share that story, you are breaking the confidence. Again, the integrity is lost when you go and tell the other person, and when you're going and telling a third person about your friend. Yes, when we talk about situation or when we are trying to give examples, we can omit their names. But sometimes what happens is we tend to give all the details, and then these people feel their feelings are hurt because somewhere down the line they hear that, "Okay, I have heard about you from someone else. One of your friends told me." So we need to ensure that we are protecting the other person's information. We might be thinking that it is not an intellectual property, so don't have to bother about it. But it is very important to value and protect the non-tangible things also. We have to ensure that we do not put any personal gain over the needs of the project or whatever work we are doing or whatever advice we are giving to someone. We have to ensure that to have a good integrity, prevent conflicts of interest or the appearance of conflict of interest and deal with them when they do. Uh, Conflict of interest. This is something again that is very common in our community. A lot of time when people make decisions, we fail to understand the conflict of interest. We think it's okay if your brother-in-law is going to make a decision for you, while he is also a board member of a certain organization. There are certain conflicts that affect so badly it is harmful to the community, because we, like in the 5 approaches we dealt, we might not be using the right approach when we make the decision. We might not be able to make a decision that is in the best interest of the other person. This issue of conflict of interest usually arise in businesses, when you are awarded with bids, when you are awarded with scholarships also, when you are awarded with certain financial grants. So whenever you are part of this kind of team, ensure that you do not have any conflict of interest. I think one of the best examples that I have seen so far is our O-level examinations and our all the examinations in DPE overall. They are very clear when there's hire the independent invigilators or the chief invigilators. For every exam, they have to fill up the form confirming that there is not a single person that is related to them who are sitting for the exam. That means a person who is living in their house. If a student is going to live in the if a student who is sitting in the exam and is living in the same house as the chief invigilator or invigilator, in that case also he or she can't be in this position. If he is related in any way of family relations, cannot be sitting. So there are many scenarios they have implied in all Department of Public Examination to ensure that the paper marking and the paper supervision, all these things are going integral. The second is contributing to the knowledge base. Now, what does contributing to the knowledge base means? It simply means you share lessons learned from the project with other project managers in the company. Um, Now, you might be thinking all these scenarios are falling into the corporate sector. But the reason why I have taken these scenarios or these factors is because here we are talking about making an ethical decision or complying or following the ethical values and ethical values in the working environment, especially in the HR sector. So we have to encourage our employees whenever they complete a project, they share their lessons with other people so that people learn, or the staff underneath them learn from them, so they also get to practice these things in situations whenever they are faced with a situation. Encourage writing about your work. This is very I think in our Maldives we tend to we have difficult in describing our experiences, or we think when someone writes about the person's experience that the person is boasting. But if you go and do the Google research, you are doing the same thing. You are collecting information of how people have done a certain thing. So why not you write about your experiences and share them? Because that will also help, that will help your community, because different communities have different kind of approach in doing certain things. So if we have our own local decision making how experiences, it will be very much easier for our community to practice it. The other thing is support the education of the project managers, stakeholders, and project management. Meaning we also have to ensure that we develop employees to make the right decision. If you do not have the proper educational qualification, if you do not have the proper skills, if you do not have the right kind of attitude or leadership, these things will be affecting your decision making process. So it's important for all our managers or HR people to ensure that you keep on developing your employees to make the right decision. Perform research to discover best practices for the use of project management and share the results with others. Now, again, you might be thinking why this word project management is coming up. Um, when you eliminate this word, use of project management, you can replace that project management as perform research to discover best practices for the work and share the results with others. So it basically means in whatever work you have to do research. Our economy or in our community, we fail to understand the importance of research. When we do not do proper research, when we do not have proper educational documents, or when we do not have enough papers to discuss among ourselves to see the precedent of a decision, what happens is we make the wrong decisions. When we fail to do the proper research work, fail to make a wrong decisions. Uh, Again, we have to take a government example in here. For example, Environmental Protection Authority. Whenever a resort is going through a construction, they have to go through an EPA analysis. This is to identify whatever they have proposed, whether it is going to be harmful to the environment, whether it's going to protect the environment. So they are basically analyzing what are the harmful things that they have proposed, what are the things that can conserve, and they identify the right thing once they submit the papers. And this is a research, or it's like a feasibility project that is being carried uh, by the company before they start the construction. So the same approach can be used when we make a decision. We have to ensure that we are doing right. We have got all the information that is required for the situation to make the right decision. When we have the right information, basically, if we have the right knowledge, you're going to make the right decision. Applying the professional knowledge. Now, the professional knowledge is going to come from your professional development. In the previous slide, which I have already highlighted about support the education of other project managers or other stakeholders, this is also about applying the professional knowledge. You must respect and recognize the intellectual work and the property of others. You cannot claim someone's work as your own, and you also need to give the due credit the person deserves. Work, research, development sources must be documented and acknowledged by the respective people, and it should be relied by other people. I think, and again, we face this situation, or these are things that that is being practiced in our community. We fail to give the acknowledgement to the people who deserves. Sometimes we fail to acknowledge the person who have put most effort. So when you make the decision, you are being unfair to one person. You are being unfair to a number of people who have put their effort, who have sacrificed their time. So it is very important to acknowledge these people and apply the professional knowledge these people with the decision. 4. Balancing the stakeholder interest. Now, if you recall, earlier I did say, I took an example where I said, the manager said in a personal conversation to a friend, I do not stand by this decision, but it is my organization's decision. So in that situation, what must have happened is the decision was taken in the best interest of all the stakeholders. You might not be agreeing with the decision, but with the decision you want to take, it might be a little bit of more harmful to others. So again, when we relate back to the 5 approaches, what is the best approach for that particular situation? The common good approach, the virtue approach, the writer's approach, the unit. So there are all these in all these situations, what you have to consider is you have to identify what is the best approach. So one of the most important thing when you make a decision is are ensuring balance stakeholders' interests. Who must represent themselves and their projects truthfully to the public, also need to provide accurate estimates of time, cost. Basically, you need to be very transparent with all the information that is on your hand to the public or to the people who you are making a decision for. Must avoid the conflict of interest and scenarios where the conflict in interest could seem apparent, meaning, again, if you think you have a conflict of interest, it's always best to recuse from it and say that you might not be the best person to make that decision. In a HR situation, if I give an example in a HR situation, it will be where we usually say, as an HR manager, in what I have learned is usually whenever an employee come and complain, what we do is we ask their immediate manager. Now, sometimes the immediate manager, there are more than 3 or 4 managers above a person. That is your immediate manager. Your immediate managers, above there is another supervisor, and above that supervisor there is a director. Above that director there is a general manager. So there are so many layers in organizations. So when an employee come and complain to HR, what we usually do is, I'm assuming that all the organizations have the same rule, where inform the respective employee's immediate manager. I have this. I have been. You have been brought to attention about certain situation. What is the issue, or can you tell the story behind? So sometimes it is better in this kind of situation to remove the immediate manager, because if the employee is complaining about the immediate manager and then there is another supervisor above the immediate manager, there might be a conflict of interest, because ultimately there are 2 supervisors who have stakeholders' interest more than the employee's interest. So in this kind of situation, it's always advisable for one person to recuse from the situation after giving the detailed explanation to HR manager, and then let the other people make a decision that they think is the right way. Now, this doesn't mean that we have to avoid that immediate manager or the immediate supervisor from the scenario, but in order to have a reflective or a fair decision, we need to avoid immediate people or the direct reporting person from the decision making process. The last is respecting the differences. Now, whenever you interact with the stakeholders in a professional or in a cooperative manner, you have to respect their differences. This means their cultural differences, their diversities, their norms, the communication style. All these things affect our decision making process. For example, our culture is usually a very friendly manner. I feel like most of the time the corporate industry, even corporate industry, is very casual. So when we make a decision, the other person really gets offended, because you have that normal in the organization you have been having a very friendly approach among the manager, the supervisors, but when you are at the desk to make a specific decision, you're being very formal, and the person and the employee thinks it was unfair, because the employee is unable to identify the boundaries between the manager and the subordinate. So it is always important when you interact with teams or when you interact with your employees, you have this certain boundary. You respect the differences so that whenever a decision is made, you don't think that the person have made a wrong decision. It's important to show flexibility also towards the diversity and the tolerance or in self-control. But most importantly, I feel when certain employees and their immediate managers have this kind of rapport, they fail to understand when a decision is made against them, why it was made. They think their respective manager will always be there to protect them. But again, when we talk about the stakeholders' interests, in every organization, whenever you make a decision, it's about the best interest. You will not be taking a decision that is going to harm the organization, and you do not want to disclose that information even to the public. For example, there have been hundreds of employees who have been fired from the organization due to different kind of misbehaviors. This include fraud cases, um, misbehavior with other employees, harassment cases. But all the organization try to keep a lid on these cases because are respecting their privacy, are respecting, you are tolerating them. But at the end of the day, you are taking a decision against them that doesn't have to go into the public. So we have to respect differences. We have, when we take a decision, these are the 5 things we have to consider. Now, what are the other do's that we need to consider when we talk about decision making? Develop the cultural self-awareness. I think it's very important for all the HR people whenever they start as a HR professional member to be self-aware or to know about the culture of the organization, what kind of behavior it is. What kind of behavior is practiced in the organization. Because when you become self-aware, the decisions you make will not be biased. You'll be making a decision that is going to be more positive, and other people will also not feel that whatever decision you have made is, in the sense, they don't feel that the decision you have made is wrong. When you are self-aware of the cultures, that is the culture that is operated in the organization, make a realistic expectation for yourself and other people, and you accept that you will make mistake but remain confident. Now this is also something that we find in our organizations, where we fail to accept our mistakes. We think when we make a mistake we'll be reprimanded, so we tend to deny it, or we tend to transfer the blame to someone else. But it's always important that you accept that you will make mistakes, but you also need to remain confident. You learn from that mistake and you correct it. Also have to ensure that when you are in a situation, especially in HR, you have to be patient. You need to have a lot of patience when you are dealing with employees, when you are dealing with all the relevant stakeholders. You also need to slow down and have these interrelationships. Now, when I say interrelationships, that means you need to build a good rapport with all your employees so that they can always be upfront with you. They are always, they know that you have an approach where they can share with you in confidence. Integrity, stay objective, minimize the blame game, and also need to have a kind of sense of humor. Don'ts. There, two cases cannot be similar. It's in very simple terms. We cannot consider all the cases to be similar. We have to, we cannot, like I said, we cannot assume that two cases can be similar. So when you make a decision, you can always refer back to the precedent cases, but you cannot make the decision based on that case, because that particular case might not be same as the case that is laid in front of you. You have to adopt, or you have to learn to adopt orientations of the other culture. Try to adopt the orientations of the other culture. Adaptation does not mean adoption. Now, might be thinking, try to adopt the orientations of other culture, what does that mean? It is simply means we have to, when you are making a decision, you don't try to adopt the orientation of the other culture. If you are trying to implement a Western culture into the Indian culture, that is where we are going to make a wrong judgment or a wrong decision, because the Western culture is totally different from the practices of the practices that is being carried in our organization. We also should not be dwelling on comparing the other culture with. I think this is another thing that we are facing right now in a lot of our practices. We try to adapt, or we try to take the same scenario from another country or another culture and saying, oh, in this company they have done this, why can't we? Again, it's different kind of people, different kind of culture. Because of this, it's obvious we cannot be comparing other culture with our own. Evaluate the other culture in terms of bad. Assume, you should not be assuming that just being yourself is enough to bring cross-cultural successes. Meaning, just because you are being yourself, does I mean, I'll take my example. Me being myself doesn't mean when I go and visit another organization or another country's organization, I can practice the same thing in that country, because it's not going to be. It's going to be totally different. I cannot practice the same things I practice in Chicago at TMA. The same way goes, I cannot practice the same. I cannot practice the TMA culture at Allied, or I cannot try to implement all the things that I used in Allied in Ace Hardware, because each and every job is different. The position where I worked was different, the company I worked was different, the industry was different. So it's basically a different kind of culture. So cannot um, I cannot assume that just because I'm myself, in like the common person in all these companies is me, but the all the four companies have different issues. They have different set of rules and regulation. So I have to a certain extent, I have to change my into the best scenario, meaning I have to consider the stakeholder interest.
Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to the second session of Ethics and Compliance. Now, today's session, before we start, I want to share some news clips with all of you. And I want all of you to read these news clip headings and try to understand what these headings are talking about. Our previous session was talking about ethics. Basically, ethics means doing the right thing, taking the moral high ground in whatever you do. So these news clips, it's situation of where people have not complied against government rules and regulations. More than 800 fined for failing to wear mask, immigration to pursue action against those employing foreigners over local artists, Bangladeshi migrant workers in Maldives chained against corruption and ill treatment, Maldives exposes abuse of migrants. Now, all these cases have one thing in similar, that is ethics. When we talk about ethics and compliance, it is very important for us to realize that when we follow ethics, that also means we have to comply the rules and regulations that are set by the respective bodies. That means all the governing bodies or the government authorities, or if we are talking about if it is an organization or company, the rules and regulations set by each and every single company. What we see here is people have directly disobeyed the regulations. For example, 4,700 fine for violation of HPA regulations. During the COVID, one of the main advices given by all the health professionals were to ensure that you wear your masks, to ensure you follow the HPA regulations, keep social distance, wash your hands frequently, wear your mask always, and not to go out during the hours that have been prohibited for us to walk out from our homes. So, when we talk about people disobeying these things, how does ethics come into this factor? Because at the end of the day, we are harming a lot of people by our actions. When you don't wear the mask, you are opening a door to all the other people around you to get COVID, to fall sick, or you are opening the door to transfer the virus from one person to the other person, from you to another person. So, ethics is very important in each and every case. More than that, we also have to ensure that we are following the rules and regulation to maintain ethics. As long as we are not going to comply the rules and regulation, then we will always be talking about why we are not maintaining ethical standards, why we are not maintaining the moral standards. So let's go in details of what compliance means. Now, in definition, compliance means the action of complying with a command, meaning that how we are listening to someone's command or someone's order or basically someone is asking you to do something. We are listening to that and we are taking action as per what have been taught to us. It is also saying the state of meeting rules or standards. In here, when we talk about ethics and compliance, we are mostly talking about organizational performance. We are mostly talking about company performances in here. So it is very important to understand in an organization or in the country, even when we take models as a nation, we have to say rules and standards is part of compliance. It is also the process of making sure your company and employees follow all laws, regulations, standards, and ethical practices that apply to your organization and industry. So, the last part basically summarizes what compliance means. It is the process of making sure the respective people around us, ourselves, we followed all the laws, all the regulations, standards, and ethical practices that apply to us in respective, whether it's an organization, whether it's an industry, or while you are working in any government office. So why compliance is so important? The main reason why compliance is important is because it brings us a protection. It gives us a protection, it gives us a safety, it ensures that we avoid the waste, we avoid the abuses, we avoid the fraud cases. One of the main reasons why rules and regulations are set is because we want our community to be free of fraud cases, free of abuses, free of discrimination, and any other kind of practices that disrupt the operation and put a person or an institution in a community risk. It's very simple. The reason why compliance is important is when you do not have any rules and regulation, you are free to wander in any way you want. And when you do not think about other people, when you do not think about your community, the people around you, what happens is you are opening another door for self-harm. You are going to increase waste in many ways. Now, waste in here doesn't mean waste cannot be only garbage. It can also be how we waste our time, how we waste our resources because of not complying. One of the things I think we can highlight is when we talk about utilities, utility usage, where we waste a lot, keeping the lights on, using extra water. So these are also waste. And if we comply into the rules and regulations, we probably will not be wasting these things. Now the question is, how is there any water? Is there any compliance for the usage of water and electricity? Some things doesn't have to be always mentioned, in a paper or in a formal way. We know when we use extra water, we are wasting because there's another party or there's another company who is ensuring to supply water, and we are holding that water of someone else when we waste that water. So compliance is important because it gives us protection. It avoids the risk uh, the community is put into situations because of certain actions. So when we ensure that we are following the rules and regulation, we are ensuring the protection of ourselves, our loved ones, and the community. One of the simple compliance I would highlight is the road violation issues we see every day. How we hear some people getting into accidents, how people drive fast. Now, these are simple compliances that are very important to anybody in a community. And when you, like, we heard one of the recent cases, I forgot the name of that case, the person, but one young man was injured for the rest of his life because of one person speeding on the road. So these are the things that this is the reason why we say that compliance is important and why compliance is given protection and safety. If that person has listened to all the advices that have been given by the traffic police, and if he has not drive in a high speed, probably he would have saved someone's life. So this is the reason why we say that compliance is important and it gives protection to people. The purpose of compliance, again, it is about helping. Now, how do we carry out an effective compliance program? One of the most important things for us to ensure to carry out an effective compliance program is implementing written policies and procedures. Now, we can make up many laws, we can set many rules and regulations, but if you are not going to implement those written policies, if you are not practicing those written policies, then uh, there is no use of having those policies, and there is no effective compliance program. Now, in each and every organization, there is a set of rules and regulation. There are standards. Now, in this, I have highlighted standards of conduct guide, ethics policy. These are one of the two important policies that needs to be set up in each and every organization, irrespective of whatever the kind of work the organization carry out. These two policies helps us to ensure that there is a disciplinary monitoring system or a mechanism in the organization. There is a policy, or there are people who will hold people accountable if they fail to meet the ethical standards of the organization. So implementing written policies and procedures. I think this we hear every day in our daily life. We hear that so many rules and regulations are being implemented by the government, implemented by organizations. But at the end of the day, what is the benefit we have earned from these policies? If it is not being implemented properly, meaning we have to ensure if we have set a standard conduct of guide, anybody who is checking on the conduct of employees or anybody who is checking on the conduct of a person, he has to cross-check with the written policies, he has to cross-check with the procedures to ensure whether he has abided by the rules and regulation, or if not, what he has done and what are the things that needs to be carried on, taken after he is breaking the rules and regulation. The second thing is designating a compliance officer and compliance committee. Now, compliance advisory committee, the term might be a little different in the sense if we talk about in respective of the organizations. The Compliance Advisory Committee, we can also call it as a disciplinary committee, or we can also take as the team that ensures people are following all the rules and regulation. These are the people who are ensuring that others are following the rules and regulation. These people ensure they go and check whether the rest of the community or the people who are in the organization, whether they are complying to all the rules and regulations set by the company. The reason why we are asking, or most of the companies have a compliance officer and a compliance committee, is it helps the organization to run smoothly. It helps people to identify easily who are the people who are not compliant. And they also become uh, one of the top people in the organization, or one of the main committee in the organization, because they are trying to ensure all kinds of compliances are set in the organization. This might be, for example, they need to be independent. They need to be an independent committee. Therefore, they might be advising the senior management what are the rules and regulations they need to bring. They will be ensuring, they'll be checking on the previous rules and regulation, the previous policies, the previous procedures, and check whether it is up to date. If it is outdated, they probably will be the people who will advise the management to ensure it is updated and modified to the situation. The third is conducting effective training and education, compliance training. Now, whenever there is a new change in any organization or in our community itself, we always have to ensure that the information is provided to the employees, or the information is provided to the community. We always hear, I think recently, not recently, when the pension office started the pension scheme, they ensured that all the employees who are related to pension related work in all the organizations, they were trained for that work. They visited each and every organization, conducted training for the employees in all the organizations, made sure that though they are able to provide the right information to the respective employees. So it's very important to conduct effective training and education whenever there is a change in the rules and regulation. Because when you do the training, when you complete the training, you are able to, you are also 100% sure, okay, people know these things, so people will be abiding by it. But if they are not aware of these changes in the rules and regulation, they will end up going in the wrong way. I'll take one example. Recently, I had to go through. Um, Whenever we travel to India, I think we all were having a very easy traveling periods in the past 10 years. But with the new changes, in the past, I think 4 to 5 years' time, it has been informed by the Indian government that we Maldivians also have to take visa whenever we are traveling to India, even if it is for a medical purpose or anything. So what happened to me was I was invited for a conference. So I applied for the conference visa because I didn't know that I mean, I went to the embassy by holding a conference visa application with the documents that was asked for the conference visa. And they told me that it's not a conference visa, it's a business meeting. So when people, I feel like in that situation, I myself also should have read all the things clearly, then I would have not come with this issue. But the difference was the way they consider conference and the way we consider business meetings are totally different. We consider conference as whenever people, like if it says a conference, then we consider it a conference. but based on their visa application, conference is only held by government authorities. It cannot be held by any private institutions or a private organization body. So if I feel like here I'm talking about, it's not about ethics, but basically it's about a compliance, following the protocol, following the rules and regulation. I had to spend one whole day in the embassy to ensure that I am able to comply with the business visa requirements. I was stuck the whole day. I had wasted my whole working day, and it was the last day of my work before I depart. So compliance training is important, or the conducting an effective training and education is essential for each and every organization, so that you do not face the hurdles that you face through after someone does something. Because it's very easy for us to say, "Oh, I didn't know about it. So how can I do? How can I act like that?" And if we are very unapologetic on in our mistakes. We are very unapologetic when we make a mistake. We do not like, we always make the other person inferior, or we make the person who is trying to comply to the rules and regulation, we make that person feel low, and we put all the blame on that person. So as an organization, if you are a government body, a person who is working in a government authority or in a government body, you need to ensure that whenever you change whenever you change rules and regulation, you ensure that you provide adequate training and education to all your employees, so that they will be able to deliver that information deliver that information to all the employees in the way you want. Otherwise, what will happen is they will be interpreting the documents, just like for me, what happened with the conference visa and business meeting. I feel like it was a misconception because I didn't realize that. So you have to ensure that when you are providing information in the websites or in a in an information booklet or anything, whatever you do, you ensure that you provide all the information that is necessary and relevant to the situation. And that part can be done via effective training and education. The fourth one is developing effective lines of communication. I think COVID pandemic was one of the best example where we can highlight on the importance of communication. Yes, you need to have a hotline, but then the question is, how can we put a hotline to all the organizations? Like, for example, each and every government office might not have a hotline. And is it necessary for them to have hotline? The hotline here, the reason why I have mentioned the hotline is because there are certain services that really needs a hotline-based service. For example, during the pandemic, when we had to go through loss of a 10-year-old girl, we realized how important it was to have a separate emergency number to reach out to ensure that we are able to reach to the hospital in time. So the reason why effective lines of communication is important is because especially when we are talking about government organizations or government bodies, we are here to serve the community. So we need to ensure that we are able to provide all the information at all times. If we look back into 10 years back, I don't think we ever had immigration hotline. I don't think we ever had a hotline to Health Protection Agency. It was only introduced via the pandemic time, because it helps people to follow the rules and regulation. If you ever have a doubt on about something that is critical to you, you can always call and ask about it. You can deliver the information to the respective person in time. So it is very important to have an effective line of communication. Now, the other thing is, just because you have a hotline doesn't mean that you are able to comply into all the, you are able to have an effective communication channel. Sometimes even the hotline are mismanaged, because when you get so many calls, I think one of the best examples you can take is Dira. A lot of people say when you call Dira, they always have this standard reply. Irrespective of the situation, they always say, this is what you do. But when they have done all these things, how how come the problem is still not resolved? So the purpose of a hotline, or the purpose of having all the lines of a proper line of communication, is to ensure that you are making the other person's life easier too. You are trying to resolve a problem that the other person is facing. So just opening a hotline or just giving a contact number to a particular person doesn't make like you cannot say, yes, we have an effective line of communication. The people at the end need to be responsible. They need to ensure that they are passing this information on time to the relevant people, and following up to ensure that all the questions or queries that have been forwarded to their team is being responded back to the customers or to the respective people in the community. So that is what we talk about hotline and about effective line communication. The fifth one is conducting internal monitoring and auditing. Now, there is no use of just having rules and regulation if you can't monitor it. For example, human resource is one of the departments that lays out the most of the rules and regulation for any organization, be it civil service, be it in the civil service or in the corporate industry. Human resource lays out almost all the important rules and regulation. And one of the most common rules and regulation that we always talk about is attendance. If we monitor, if HR is keeping a strict monitoring mechanism in the attendance, do you think that we will have attendance issues? Do you think people will come and blame to HR, saying that it's because of HR that we were not able to punch in? So when we talk about internal monitoring and auditing, we are talking about ensuring that there are proper mechanisms to ensure when you put a rule, when you set a rule, that it is being followed. Now, when you ask an employee to come on time, say that time or official hours is 8 o'clock, but when he comes to office at 8 o'clock, nobody is there, the office is locked, he doesn't have access to the lock. Now, person who is supposed to open the office is coming at 8:50. We say very easily, oh, it will be corrected. The person will, we will modify, or we will change the timing to 8 o'clock. We don't put 8:50. But then we are again opening another hole to make more mistakes, and we are creating more grievances. If you are supposed to open the office at 7:45, you need to come at 7:45 so that people who are coming to work at 8, they are able to punch in, they are able to punch in or sign in. Because there's no proof. For example, it might be only one person who have come at sharp 8 o'clock. And who is there to give the proof that he came at 8 o'clock? So these kind of questions at HR, we do cross-question people like this. So we have to ensure that whenever you set a regulation or whenever you set a rule, you have to ensure that there is a proper mechanism to monitor these rules and regulation. Why people have not followed the rule? If they have not followed, why? What was the reason? Was it a fault from the employer side? Was it a fault from the employee side? What can we do to improve so that we do not face these issues? So internal audits is one of the most important things that we can do to ensure that we are we have a proper mechanism. Because as you know, audits give us a very clear picture, or it gives us the whole timeline of situations. It gives us a detail of how a work was carried out, what are the stages involved. I'll take an example from HR side. When you talk about internal audits in HR, one of the main areas is employee files or recruitment and selection, job advertisement. As per the employment law, we have to ensure that we advertise for any vacancies. We have to ensure that we have all the proper documents in any employee's file, and there are certain documents that are a must to be kept in employee's file, like the employment contract. So when the auditing is done, the person is going to check each and every document. The person is going to check each and every log to ensure that you have followed the protocol, you have done all the things as per the SOP of the organization. Compliance inspections. Again, it's the same. It's very similar to compliance. I mean, compliance inspections and compliance training are not so similar, but it gives the same kind of same. It is it keeps the person in the same kind of situation. The compliance inspection is also about ensuring that people are following the rules and regulations. For example, HR person waiting at the signing machine to see whether each and every person comes and punching in the fingerprint machine. Because there are cases where people say, "Oh, I forgot to punch it," and when they are updating their attendance, they put, "Okay, I came at 7:55." But in reality, is the person came at 8:50. You are losing out 20 minutes of. There will be a pay deduct of 20 minutes. So in order to avoid that, you say, "Oh, I forgot to punch it." So people now, it might not be in the same as compliance inspections, but it's basically a person is there to monitor whether these people are following the rules and regulation, whether they are following the set standard procedures. For example, we take the aviation industry. Safety is very critical in aviation industry. So it's very important for a safety officer or a safety compliance person to be there before each plane is taken off. They need to check thoroughly each and every place and each and every corner in the aircraft to ensure there is not a single breach of safety. So having a compliance inspection, it means you are taking the responsibility to ensure that everybody is following the rules and regulations so that nobody is put into a harm. The third one is peer reviews. Now, you might be thinking, why does peer review fall into the conducting internal monitoring auditing? Peer reviews is more about each other's performances. No. Peer reviews here, we are talking about each other's feedback on based of how they are following the protocols, how they are following the set standard procedures, how they are following the rules and regulations. Because your peer is the one who sit with you all every day, all the time. Around 5 to 6 or 5 to 8 hours you spend together. So your other person who is sitting with you or other person who is in front of you will understand or will know how you behave. He or she will be able to also identify if there is any kind of misdemeanor from you, or the person will be able to observe and identify if you are not following the rules and regulation, whether you are taking a cut, whether you are trying to omit something. This is the reason we say that peer reviews are important when you are conducting the internal monitoring auditing. The last one, one of the last ones is external audits, reviews, and inspections. Now you might be thinking, we are already having internal audits. So what's the use of having an external audit? Now, this is the reason why it's important for external audits or external person to review and inspect is to ensure that we are following the rules and regulation. Because despite being an honest person, we still, at the end of the day, we still take the company side and we try to hide organizational mistakes. We try to hide these things. We sometimes take very carelessly and say, it's okay, it's one time thing, it doesn't matter. If we, this time we didn't have any issues. Next time we'll ensure that it doesn't happen. So when you keep on doing internal audits like this, you are opening you are opening a grave for more mistakes, because there's nobody else who is going to come and tell you, oh, that is not right, you will be penalized. Because at the end of the day, what happens with us humans is we do things only when we realize that it is going to cost us. Cost us in the sense means either your pay is going to be cut, either you will be suspended, or you might lose the job. So out of fear, there are certain things we carry out. But when there's an external audit, review, and inspection, it keeps the organization on toes, and it keeps the employees on toes to ensure that they are following all the rules and regulations. They are following the set protocols. They are following the SOPs that is set by the organization departments. So it's important for external audits, reviews, and inspections to be carried out so that you understand if there's anything to be improved, if there's anything that can be done to mitigate the differences that comes from by following these rules and regulations. It helps the organization to keep updated with the latest standards in each and every in each and every department. So the sixth part is enforcing standards through well-publicized disciplinary guidelines. Now, it says consequences levied consistently regardless of the employee's stature within the organization. Enforcement consistent with appropriate disciplinary action. Now, the reason why we are saying that enforcing standards through well-publicized disciplinary guidelines is when you have guidelines that are open to public, meaning most of the government authorities, their rules and regulations are known to all the people. Now, all the people here I'm trying to say is all the relevant people who works in civil service and who are related to civil service. They are very well aware of all the disciplinary guidelines and all the enforcing standards. Now, when you have well-publicized disciplinary guidance, it means consequences levied consistently regardless of the employee's stature within the organization, and when the enforcement is consistent with appropriate disciplinary action, the employees will be following the rules and regulation. When you know that the public knows if this thing is if this thing is done by someone, he or she needs to go through this disciplinary procedure. I think again, this is also one of the things that we always talk about in our community, where we say high-profile people committing to like their mistakes are being highly publicized in our community. But at the end of the day, we think they are not being punished, or they are not getting the justice that needs to be given to the other people who are put on harm because of their action. And the reason is when you do not have that ethical standard, when you do not have that ethics or the moral values, you are obviously not going to be scared of other people in the community. But in a general population, we think that when there are standards, when there are rules and regulation, the rules and regulations, when it is publicized well, people will ensure they are following it, and people who are trying to enforce these rules and regulation, they also try to ensure that they are implementing these standards effectively. The seventh is responding promptly to detected problems and undertaking corrective action. Now, this is the same thing that I have just mentioned earlier when we talked about the effective line of communication. Hotline procedures require 2 weeks for action elevation to senior management. Basically, when issue is being raised to to a person, if the person is not going to take prompt action on that, then there is no use of having a compliance procedure, or there is no use of having a compliance law, because you are not able to detect the problem, you are not able to respond to the problem promptly, and if you are not able to take a corrective action, then you are always, you are basically letting it go. You are allowing people to make mistake. You are allowing people to be ethically wrong. You are saying that it's okay to not obey the rules and regulation. So when we talk about responding promptly to detected problems and undertaking corrective action, it means trying to act as soon as possible to those situations when you know or when you have detected there is an issue. You know that this is not right. You need to take the corrective action ASAP. For example, uh, I will take this example from a working environment where a colleague hit his colleague. Now, these are here we are talking about two adults. We very specifically say in all the organizational procedures, we say that violence is not allowed in the organization. You refrain from any violent action while you are at work. But for some reason, two adults in the workplace, they fight with each other and they are being harmed by each other's action. Now, what is the problem in here? We need to understand why we have detected a problem, why these two people have started a fight while they were at work. What was the reason for it? And how do we correct this action? So it is very important to attend to an issue immediately, or at least as soon as possible, not after 2 weeks, not after 1 week, because then we will not be able to gather the facts correctly. The incidences might not be recorded in the correct way. The statements might differ, or the other person's mind might be changed. It might change because of the time gap. So it's very important to ensure that you respond promptly to any problems and take corrective actions. The key to a successful compliance program. Now, what we just covered was the things that we just covered was effective compliance program. Now, this basically, the stages that I have mentioned is common stages that we can use in any kind of setup, meaning whenever we do something in organization, for example, when we are launching a product or we are launching a service, if that is the case, we have to take all these things into consideration, meaning we have to ensure that if there is a written policy and procedure, we have to ensure it needs to be implemented in the right way. We need to know if when we are selling that service to the community, there is a dedicated person or there is a team who will deal with all the sales queries that comes for that product. Conduct effective training and education. In order to sell it more, you need to provide education. You need to provide the training to employees. Communication. Again, to ensure that you are passing the right information at the right time and people are able to collect information, you need to have proper channels of communication. Conducting internal monitoring and auditing. If you are launching a service or if you're selling a service, it's important for you to monitor how the performance is going, why there is a drop in the sales, and to adhere into all the ethical standards. You need to ensure that you have external audits, you have compliance inspectors to know whether these people are following the sales protocol and everything. So the 7 stages that I have highlighted in this are common common 7 stages that we go through in our organization whenever we carry out, whenever we roll out a service or roll out a product, or whenever we try to implement rules and regulation. Now, the last part is the key to a successful compliance program. Now, as you can see in this screen, there is one image that I have highlighted saying communication. Communication is the most important key to the successful for any to have a successful program in any organization, irrespective of whether we are trying to create awareness about rules and regulation, or irrespective of about a company trying to start up a trying to start a new service or trying to launch a new product. It's the communication that plays the most important role. Because if you fail to communicate to all the relevant people or all the relevant stakeholders, at the end of the day, there is no use of telling, oh, today we had this issue because that person failed to follow through the procedures. Why did that person did not follow the procedures? He was not informed. Whose responsibility was it to inform him about the changes? Is it the HR? Is it his immediate manager? Or is it his team? So you can go on and on and just try to find the line, the bottom line, or the person who is at the core of this issue. We can try to find. But the answer is, if that person have not conveyed the message to the right person, and if the person have conveyed the message in half, then the message, when the message is passed to the other person, it gets all the things that is important in the message is gone. Basically, how we call it Chinese whisper. We know that when we whisper into someone's ear, we pass a message. And then when that person is transferring that message to the next person, for somehow it keeps on, the message is going to be reduced, and at with the last person, it might be a total different kind of message than what you have whispered to the person. So communication is a very important key role for a successful compliance program. Now, as you can see, in these 6 bubbles, there are certain 6 areas that is highlighted to ensure why it is important and the benefits of effective communication. The first is it establishes professionalism. Another one is builds long-lasting relationships, higher engagement, more friends and connections, overcome obstacles, and it breeds trust. These are the 6 areas that we think is very important for us to ensure for a successful compliance program. The reason why we say it establishes professionalism is because you know that there are people who are able to send the information, who are able to provide the information that is needed to you. So that is very important for an effective communication. It is also important because it helps to build long-lasting relationship among the community. For example, if our Maldives Police Services is not going to disclose us the issues, the things that they think the community people need to be aware of, we are losing a kind of trust on them, because we think that they are responsible for our safety, and if they do not share those information with us, how can we try to protect us? So it establishes a professionalism, it helps us to build long-lasting relationships, and it increases a higher engagement. When you are highly engaged, now what does highly engaged means? Highly engaged means the person knows, the person is involved in all the setting. The person knows the things that he or she have to do, not to do. what are the things he needs to do to achieve certain targets. So basically, the person knows what he can do to be a better citizen or a better person, and he or she tries to ensure that his or her actions give a positive impact to the community. Now, with proper communications, we get more friends and we build a better network. Uh, it's easy to overcome the obstacles. Yes, if we do not have proper channels to communicate, we will come with this issue of overcome obstacles. Meaning, we we come up with obstacles, but in order for us to get over those obstacles, we need to overcome it. Sorry, we need to communicate with people so that we can overcome the differences. Now, apart from that, these are another steps that I believe in order for us to have a successful compliance program, these are the things we need to follow. The first is determine your goals. Are you raising awareness, driving intranet traffic, or making compliance part of your organization's culture? Define your goals early so you can base your communication strategy on that. Now, question is, when we talk about rules and regulation, why do we need to determine our goal? For each and everything we do, there is a goal. Let's start from home. When you wake up and when you start to get ready for your work, at the back of your mind, you will be thinking of all the things that you have to do. You set a certain deadlines within yourself, thinking, okay, this is my schedule for the day. You run through the schedule, the kind of work you have to carry out for the day in your brain. You are thinking about it. And you think, okay, I'll be reaching office at 7:30. These are the urgent things that I need to attend immediately. So and then after that, in the next half an hour, I will be talking with my team to ensure that they are set for the day when they go out into the community or when they are going to the sales pitch, whether they have all the information that is required, all the necessary accessories. So basically, behind our mind, without realizing it, we do set goals. For that particular day, this person's goal was to ensure that all the urgent work was completed by 10 o'clock in the morning. That is a goal. So for a successful compliance program also, you need to know what is the goal that you want to achieve from this rule and regulation. Or what is the purpose of this law? Who is it going to benefit? Why is it necessary? So basically, the 5 Ws can be used to understand your goals. You have to identify the things that matters to you, why it is important, and like it says, define your goals early so you can base your communication strategy on them. Yes, when you have a set goal, you are able to work towards and you are able to define your goals early, and you will be able to communicate more properly to the people. You are able to explain what is your expectation from them, why it is important. All these things will be coming under determine your goals. The second is understand your audience. Now, when you set anything in our community, it is not like when we were 20 years ago. The kind of people who are in our community has been changing drastically. In the olden days, even if you have a household, in your household, if there is a polio sick boy, the highest possibility is you will not be taking that person out, and you are showcasing a different persona in front of other people. and they misread you, thinking this person doesn't have any issues, this person doesn't have any authority, this person doesn't have any worries. But at the end of the day, you have certain things that you have to complete, but your audience is only looking into what they see physically. So, in order for you to understand your audience, your communication needs to be strong audience, which intend to listen. And it also needs to be a part of where you select the resources and channels that make sense of your audiences. So it's very important to ensure that you understand your audience, to whom you are making a law. For example, when you are making a law, how many kind of people are in our community? One example is employment law, Ramadan allowance. When we talk about the first time when Ramadan allowance was allowed for companies to be distributed, we had the issue of employees having different kind of pension, uh, different kind of allowances, Ramadan allowances, like based on their income category. At the first stage, there was a mention where foreigners who are not Muslims, they will not be getting an allowance. And then there was an issue where we said, okay, if the employee's salary doesn't meet this required standard bracket, the minimum, they will be only given a minimum of this amount. So when you don't understand your audience in a proper way, you end up making rules and regulation. You end up making an incorrect rules and regulation that is not uniform to everyone. And then you have to correct those mistakes, and it becomes a little bit of a nuisance to the people who are trying to implement it. So ensure that you understand your audience, collect information, collect feedback so that you know that your compliance program is running well ahead. The third stage of this, uh, so we were talking about communicating with the audience. Understand the audience before you try to implement any program. So the third stage is align internal communications, meaning when we talked about previously how important communication it was, how important it is to have an effective open line of communication, and ensuring those communications are also being communicated to the relevant authorities. This is what we talk about aligning internal communications. Now, when you get a call from your employee, you need to ensure that message is being relayed to the relevant person on time, and what is the policy that needs to be set, or what is the internal communication procedures that need to be set in the organization to ensure that the message is delivered on time and it is being attended. So align internal communications, prevent employee burnout and communication competition with other departments. Is there any pre-existing newsletter coming from HR, or ask them to include some of your content too? Now, when we talk about a compliance or when we talk about rules and regulations, we have to ensure that whether that rule and regulation is going to be affected to any other person, whether the set rules is going to affect the performance of another department, or what is the consequences of not having a bounce back. Like I think in all the organizations, whenever you come up with a policy, you always send it for feedback. Now, the reason is to ensure that we are not going to repeat certain things within the organization in different departments when we are working, as we all are working together. Certain things needs to be informed in one policy. It doesn't have to be mentioned repeatedly in each and every policy. And those certain steps or certain actions doesn't need to be done repetitively, because at the end, otherwise, what will be facing is the employee burnout. When you have a proper line of communication, you know to whom you have to deal out, you know to whom you have to reach out to solve that problem. Otherwise, at the end of the day, you will be burned out. Your competitor will be having an advantage over you. The other person who is doing the wrong thing will be saying, okay, I have escaped. I don't have to worry about anything. So it is very important to ensure that you have a proper internal communicate, all your internal communications are aligned. Now, you might be thinking why it is saying ask them to include some of your content too. Now, this is when certain policies have, for example, one policy that is implemented by the marketing department might be very relevant to the sales department. So the question is it necessary for both the departments to have these policies or this clause, or you can mention in one policy and refer it to the other one to be referred as the marketing policy. So marketing and sales, they both go hand in hand together. So it is okay for you to all have an agreement that certain things needs to be mentioned only in the sales policy and certain things need to be mentioned in marketing policy. And if it is very, very important or critical, then it needs to be mentioned in both so that there is a very clear line of communication where you are able to mm, communicate to the right person when when it is required. The other one is align with current training. Speak with internal department to find out what training is already in place so your messaging can enhance rather than detraction from current initiatives. Now, this is another thing that we face. I think people who are in the law field, who are, because we keep changing laws very frequently. And when we change laws, you also again have to do the training. You need to know what is it had changed, how it is going to be impacted to your work, how you can be, how it is going to change the current issues that you are trying to resolve. So it's important that whenever there is a compliance program, whenever you are trying to implement a program, that you align with the current training. You find out what training is already, what are the trainings that have been conducted, what are the trainings that have not been conducted, and what are the trainings that are really essential to have a successful compliance program, so that you also do not get distracted from from the main issues or from the main problems. 5, it is assess available resources. Having enough resources like content and staff can make or break your compliance communication strategy, meaning it also assess your available resources to ensure quality and consistency. I think I will take one of the most common thing we see in the city of Male, traffic issue. We say that I say this because I feel like sometimes we do not have enough people on the road to monitor the traffic, monitor the rush hour, because so many roads we have congestion issue. So many roads get blocked at a certain time of the day, and it is impossible for a person to walk or for a vehicle to go through to drive around. So assess available resources. If we are talking about maintaining the traffic rules and regulation, if we are trying to ask people to comply the traffic rules and regulation, we also have to ensure that we are providing enough resources to them. Recently, we heard where in the news it was said people who park their motorcycles or their vehicles in areas that are not allowed, they will be fined or their vehicles will be towed. Now, the question is, how can you make someone penalize for a thing that he or she doesn't have any control over? We know there is an issue of vehicle parking in Malik. in the capital city, because wherever we go, we don't see a single space. We will barely see a single space to park the respective vehicle. So when you tell the public, no matter what, you are going to be fined for 700 rupiah, saying on the term of illegal parking, then you are not providing the available resources. If you have provided adequate parking spaces, and then uh, they have disobeyed that rule, then you can fine them, then you can charge or penalize them. But without providing the resources, without providing the staff, without providing the equipments that needs to be used to implement a service or launch a product or whatever it is, you need to have enough resources so that you are able to successfully implement anything. And you also have to ensure that the available resources are in quality and it is consistent. Another example of available resources is during the pandemic, when it was total lockdown. I had this friend who they were trying to move from one house to another house, and what happened to them was it was total lockdown. People were not allowed to go at all. At that time, we did not have even the permit. It was prohibited for us to walk around, get out from our houses. Only certain permits were given on base of the situation. So what happened to them was they had packed all their things and they brought it. They kept it packed downstairs, out on the not downstairs, out in the road, because they were waiting for the vehicle to come. And when the person who was moving, he went to take the last pack. When he went to take the last pack, someone came and took all of the things that had been packed for their new house. They took all the things, put it into a lorry, and they rushed out. Now, they informed police, and the police saw because nobody saw the vehicle, but so they had to go through the videos. Now, this person had passed from Lonziare Mago, which apparently was one of the most one of the most few roads that did not have any police officer or anybody. And in a normal occasion also, this road does not have, we rarely see traffic police patrolling on the road. So the question is, the situation here, what I'm trying to imply is, if we had enough resources during a pandemic, especially when we have talked about lockdown, when we are talking about people trying to abide by the HPA protocols, if we had enough resources, do you think this issue could have been prevented immediately? Because vehicles were not supposed to go, they were not supposed to drive around, people were not supposed to walk out of their houses. So if there was an officer on the road to patrol, he or she could have asked or stopped the driver and say, "Hey, what are you doing? What is this? Do you have a special permit?" So this is what we are talking about, available resources. When you implement something, when you try to implement anything, rule or regulation, if you are trying to implement a law, you need to ensure that you have enough resources for the monitoring mechanism, to ensure there is a consistency and ensure there is a quality maintenance in implementing the compliance. 6 is the verified technical capabilities. Now, we know, again, I'll be taking the pandemic issue or the pandemic period because in the pandemic, we realized how important technology was to us, especially to a country like Maldives, how we were able to survive with the changes in the technology, how we had improved vastly. We automatically, for example, I will take the retail industry. We never thought the corner shop near our house will deliver things to our homes. We never thought STO will start delivering to houses because all these days it was only for the wholesale customers, the retail shops or any other shop did the delivery. On a retail basis, one consumer basis, delivery was not done at all. So we have to use technology to our advantage. We have to understand our capabilities and we have to ensure that we are using the best content or the best technical technologies to deliver what we want. So when we talk about applying, now this might be another question in your head. What does technology do? How can technology help us to implement or implement a successful compliance program? Because the reason why technology is going to play a vital role is because today we have mobile phones in our hands always, and it is the most easiest ways to communicate with people. So you need to ensure that you like uh, the recent apps that started, Go Prime, Gardamart, Avascart, all these shopping appliances, they are all installed into to people's mobile. So what happened is when we talk about uh, arranging a successful compliance program, we have to use this technological advantage to ensure that we are providing the information to the people on time and on spot. Like they do not have any excuse to say, oh, I didn't get that information, I don't have any access to. How do I access to it? Do I have to sit every time in my at my desktop to complete the formalities? No. If you have all these things on your fingertip or in your mobile, or if the technological, if there is a technological update in this way, it helps people to follow it. It helps people to be updated with it. Now, for example, another tech thing that we all did, government tried, not tried, what they implemented was the health portal, where they collect immediately build a health portal, send out a message to all the people with a link asking them to update their medical records so that the ministry or the HPA have all the relevant information that is needed for a particular person. So they can, whenever they type the person's ID, national ID number, or the passport, or the work permit, they are able to get all the information that is required to people. So it is very important that you have use these technological advantages to your strength. And if we talk about HR, as it is mentioned in this slide, we are talking about the email communication. We are also talking about the intranet post. We are talking about video hosting. We need to identify what kind of technology is going to be the easiest way for you to reach out to the people who are relevant to these things. So technology makes our life easier. It helps us to enhance our daily life. It makes us complete our. It helps us to speed up the services. So it's very important to use the technology, but then again, at the same time, you also have to ensure whether you have that capacity when you implement a technological upgrade. You cannot be saying in the middle of a session or in the middle of like while the person for example, a person is using a certain app to submit a form to the government body, and then the app is showing up in alert saying that you cannot do this because of certain thing. Because due to a limitation in the app, he or she is not able to proceed at all. I'll tell one example. Again, something that happened to me. That was during in the month of August when I was trying to renew my passport. My passport had expired during the pandemic days, and I was not able to renew it. So as soon as everything went to normal, I applied for my passport renewal. And I came to know that in the pandemic, immigration introduced a portal to submit the application for national ID renewal and passport renewal. So I did what they have asked to do. In the first time, what happened to me was when they said to upload a photo, I didn't realize that my scanned photo will not be accepted in. Because what I did was I had a passport size photo that was not 1 month old. I scanned it from the my scanner and I uploaded it. It rejected saying that the photo is not suitable. Then I came to know that I have to go to a digital, I have to go to a photo booth and get from them, I have to get the original soft copy of the passport photo. And then only I have to submit it. So I did that again. They rejected saying it needs to be not less than 1 month. I informed them in the hotline saying that it is a picture that is not 1 month old. I took this on a particular date, and that is the date I have uploaded it. They said, okay, you upload it again. For the third time, it rejected. I got very upset. What is the issue? Like, with this technological advantage, I'm still not able to proceed it. So I came to know what happens is the system automatically rejects the same photo. So this is what we talk about, the technical capabilities. So ensure whenever you come with technological apps that it helps you to provide a better service. The seventh one is select content. Now you need to ensure that you choose the content that fits your organization's tone and culture. And this include anything from compliance and ethics related articles, videos, cartoons, or toolkits. Now, when we talk about compliance, when we talk about ethics, this is something very important. Whatever you share with the community, if there's any information that you think is relevant, you need to know whether you have to ensure that the content you are going to send out to the public, it's the right content, it's going to provide the right information, it set the right tone. I think one of the best example we see in when we talk about content is the social media. On a personal level, when we put certain things on our social media, we question ourselves or we question other people when they put up something. Why did they put it up? Does it fit to our community standards? Does it fit to our culture? I think the TikTok videos in our community, initially there was a hesitance by people thinking, why are they doing it? It is not right. But soon it became okay with people and they didn't bother about it. But then again, when we talk about compliance, it's very important for you to set the right tone. If it is a government organization or a government body that is sending out a message to the public, you cannot be saying something different and you cannot be doing it in a different manner. You talk about whistleblowing, you talk about the issue of bribing, but then behind the closed doors, if your employees are going to practice the bribing, if your employees are going to launder money, or if your employees are taking up fraud up cases and encouraging this behavior, then the message you are sending out to the public is wrong. Therefore, whenever you deliver something, whenever you are trying to launch a product or launch a service, set the rules and regulations, set the standard operating procedures, please ensure that it fits the organization's tone and it fits the organizational culture. And the most important thing is ensure that it is complying with the ethical standard that is set by the organization. The last one is deliver communication. Your compliance communication plan is ready for launch. Remember to analyze your plan as often as possible and make necessary changes based on audience feedback. In here, it means once you deliver everything, you need to ensure that you need to always keep on checking whether whether any changes is required. You need to collect audience feedbacks and work on those things, because if you collect the feedback but you don't act on it, if you don't act on it, then there's no purpose of a compliance communication plan. If there is no use of even saying that you have a policy, because at the end of the day, for each and every policy, you have to make sure that you bring the necessary changes, you collect feedback and work on it, because otherwise there is no purpose of it. Because then people will think, oh, the policy is just for the name's sake. You don't have to worry about anything. There's no person who is, there's no compliance officer, there's no compliance committee, there is no compliance inspector checking whether we are complying into the rules and regulation. So we have to ensure that when we implement a compliance strategy or compliance program, that you are delivering the communication through the right channel and acting promptly to all the issues. So in simple terms, compliance program must be put into place and, more importantly, communicated repeatedly and enforced properly throughout the entire organization. I will take one example again from Modus Police Media Services. What they do is, I think, whenever I keep a tab on Modus Police Services to get the necessary information. So whenever I go through my feed, I see a Modus. In the past, I think they have been trying to create an awareness on traffic rules and regulation for quite a long time. So they keep on providing all this information. They keep on repeatedly reminding the community the traffic rules. They ensure, and sometimes when it is the normal school days, during the school rush hour, what are the roads that are going to be blocked? What are the roads that are not going to be blocked? These information, they do keep on circulating in the social media so that other people can see. Yes, it might not be at the level we want, but at least there is a repetitive communication channel that is being opened by Modus Police Service to provide information to ensure that people are aware of the traffic rules. So as a company, when we talk about repeated communicating repeatedly, I think this goes to HR, where I know when I was as an HR manager, I tend to send a reminder to my employees about their attendance to ensure they have completed their attendance, like if they have forgotten the punch out or punch in, to ensure that it is being informed to the HR department so that we can take into consideration. So these things needs to be repeatedly, yes, it's a difficult task, but at the end of the day, it makes our life easier when we keep on repeating these things. A company should implement mechanisms designed to ensure that its compliance code is effectively communicated to all directors, officers, employees. This means repeated communication, frequent and effective training, and ability to provide guidance when issues rise. When we talk about ethics and compliance, I would like to take this case. Nadai of CIB Group says, no, ethics and compliance standards are complementary, but ethics and compliance are not interchangeable. Ethics should be an integral part of compliance. You can be compliant without being ethical. We strive for both. We want to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. By doing the right thing and hitting all the rules for compliance, then not only are you doing right by your customers and the consumers, but you are also not going to get hit with some kind of enforcement action that is going to prevent you from doing what you want to do with your business. If banks are found to be not in compliance with the various laws and regulations, then they can face penalties. Some of these penalties can be if you want to open another branch, you are not able to, and if you want to acquire another entity, you can't until you have cleaned up whatever your compliance issues are. We don't want to find ourselves in that situation. So the easiest way to not find yourself in that situation is to be compliant. I think we can apply this situation in our companies because a lot of time private companies or if the companies in the corporate sector complains we were the government did not help us, the government didn't do this for us, but at the end when we go and check the records there are a number of companies who have not paid their company fees or there are certain dues that they owe to the government, and because of these things they have so much of issue to implement their new services, launch new products, or like in this case you are not being able to open a new outlet. So the most easiest thing for all of us to do is you need to do the right thing instead of delaying it. Or I say delaying it because we sometimes think, okay, um, I owe money. For example, I owe money to someone. I get my salary. Instead of paying that person, what I do is I go and purchase whatever I want and I spend my whole salary. And the poor guy who lent me money is waiting for me for another 2 months again. So the right thing for me in here was as soon as I get my salary, I should have paid him off. And that is the right thing to do. So unless if there is an emergency, life-threatening situation, then you can excuse and tell the person, this is the reason why I was not able, but definitely as soon as I get something. But we lack this minimum courtesy also in our community. The last words which I just mentioned comes from Deborah Skinner that she's the Chief Administration Officer, FNM Bank of Central California and Chair of the Western Bankers Association. So when we talk about ethics and compliance, if ethics are poor at the top, that behavior is copied down throughout the organization. We say that we tell our children when we are informed, but when other people, especially the counselors or the psychological counselors or the behavioral counselors, they say that children copy their actions from their adults or from their surrounding environment. So the same thing goes in an organization or in a company or in a government body. If you think your top management is not following the ethics or if the top management is not compliant to the rules and regulation, obviously it gives an advantage to the lower employee to say, yes, I don't have to follow because why is he exempted from it? Because no one is above the law. Every single person who is in their respective country or in the organization, everyone have to follow the rules and regulation. Nobody is singled out. And if it is singled out, there is a reason why that person is being singled out and how it can be singled out. So if in order for us to ensure that we are practicing we live in an ethical environment, we practice ethics every day on a daily basis, we comply to all the rules and regulation, the first people who have to take this action is the people who are at the top of the organization. Because then practice what you preach, basically. So that is the end of this session. I hope you learned additional information on basis of ethics and compliance. I hope you understood how important it is to have a successful compliance program and how to implement a successful compliance program. At the end of this session, there will be an assessment given to all of you. you can complete the assessment and forward it to the respective person. Thank you.